Everything's bigger in Texas, including heartbreak, scandals, and love stories. Morning sunlight spills through the windows of Silas Ketchum's general store. Laura Jennings moves quietly behind the counter, counting coins and straightening goods. Eli Grant enters, hat in hand, pretending to browse. Silas watches from behind the counter. "You plan on buying anything today, Eli, or just taking in the view?" Eli chuckles. "Now, Silas, there's a lot of nice things in here to see." He smiles at Laura, and she smiles back, appreciating the compliment. Laura thinks to herself, "He might make a nice suitor if I didn't have my heart set on medical school." As Silas turns his back, Eli palms a small silver necklace and slips it into his coat pocket. Later that evening at the saloon, lamplight flickers against worn wallpaper. Ruby Calhoun sits by the window, lost in her thoughts and brushing her long red hair. A whiskey glass rests nearby, untouched. A knock at the door. Then Eli steps in, smiling, removing his hat. "Oh, I thought you might not be coming after all," Ruby says. Eli grins. "Not a chance. I was looking for something special, just for you." He sets a small music box on the table, polished, delicate, far too fine for a saloon girl in Caprock Crossing. Ruby's eyes widen. "Oh, it's so beautiful. I can't believe you got this just for me." He tells her, "Well, it's your pay, Ruby, for the next story." Disappointed, Ruby looks down. "Oh, I see." "Ruby, don't start feeling guilty. You deserve it, and it helps me write interesting stories." She looks down, thinking, he doesn't get it. She turns the key on the music box. A soft tune fills the room. Both listen as the music fades into the night. He watches her a beat too long. She closes the lid gently. Later, Silas locks up for the night. He pauses near the shelves, noticing gaps, a comb, a necklace, and now the music box. He frowns and lights a lantern, suspicion growing. That girl thinks I don't see her, but I do, and I'll have my proof. The next evening, Silas climbs the steps to Ruby's room at the saloon. The piano plays softly downstairs. He knocks and enters, removing his hat, and notices the music box on the vanity. "Miss Ruby, haven't seen you at the store lately. Did I miss you?" Ruby smiles faintly. "I stopped by to see Laura yesterday, but you weren't there." Silas nods slowly, eyes heavy on the music box. The next morning, as sunlight stretched over Caprock Crossing, Eli steps through the door of the general store. Silas waits for him, expression tight, as he guides him to the back room. He closes the door behind them. Silas says abruptly, "We've had thefts. Saw the music box in Ruby's room, the same one that came in yesterday, same one that's missing today. I want you to write about it. I hate to admit to it, but I thought it might have been Laura. We need to let the town know to beware of the low moral types, like saloon girls." Eli swallows. "Might take a few days. I'm in the middle of another story right now." Silas's tone hardens. "Don't delay. I need the town informed before the judge arrives. Sheriff's on his way to arrest Ruby as we speak." At the sheriff's office, the morning light slants through the window. Sheriff Garth Maddox sits at his desk, reading Silas's statement aloud. Behind the bars, Ruby Calhoun listens and thinks to herself, "Well, Silas, you weren't so mad that you didn't stay with me last night." The sheriff looks up. "Ruby, if there's more to this, now's the time to speak it." Ruby meets his eyes. "Would it matter? You're gonna believe a shopkeep over a saloon girl. Fine. I did it, but he can have it back to remember me by. I ain't gonna need it here." The sheriff studies her face, jaw tightening. He knows a lie when he hears one, but he says nothing. That night, a chill settled over the quiet streets of Caprock Crossing. Laura arrived at the jail carrying a covered bowl of warm stew. Greeting the sheriff, she says, "Thought Ruby might like a warm meal." She's been so kind to me, and it's such a cold night." "Nice of you," says the sheriff. "She's got a visitor, but you go on in." "Don't stay too long inside." Ruby sits on the squeaking cot, arms folded. Eli stands at the bars, head down. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You know that, don't you?" She stands and steps closer. "Let them think I'm a thief, along with everything else they say. Now I'm a liar too." "I'll do it for you, Eli." Laura, entering the door with the stew, freezes. Her voice breaks the silence. "You don't have to lie for him, Ruby." Ruby lifts her chin. "Laura, this isn't a place for a lady." Eli smiles at seeing Laura, but then looks down, embarrassed in front of her. He says to Laura, "It's not what it sounds like." But Laura doesn't acknowledge him, and he leaves without a word. Ruby turns to Laura. "I would have done just about anything for his smile, but I see it's yours he wants." Ruby sits in silence, one tear tracing down her cheek. Later that night, Sheriff Maddox returns to the jail. "You ought to get some rest," he says. Ruby looks up. "Hard to sleep here, it's so quiet." He offers a cup of coffee through the bars. "We'll talk more tomorrow." "It's not over until it's over." Ruby. She watches the steam rise and smiles, thinking, it's not over for Eli either. With dust trailing and the wind behind him, Tahsénta rode into Caprock Crossing, worry etched across his face. His sister Sani and Johanna Mercer had both fallen ill. Sani had sent him to find Laura Jennings, the only person in town with any medical training. Laura had learned from Sani, a skilled medicine woman and one of the few Comanche who still remained in the territory. When Dr. Colbert left for a bigger city, Laura found an old medical book on his desk with a note tucked inside. "For you, Laura. Follow your dreams." The first person Tahsénta saw was Eli, sitting on the steps of the general store. He'd come earlier hoping to speak with Laura, but she had turned him away. Now he sat there, turning his hat in his hands, wondering how to make things right. Tahsénta approached quickly, startling him. "I'm looking for a woman named Laura Jennings. Where might I find her? It's urgent." Eli's reporter instinct was to ask questions, but he wasn't about to press this tall, muscular Indian. "She's inside," Eli said. Without a word, Tahsénta moved to the door, his voice steady but urgent. "Sani needs you. Bring medicine." Laura turned to Silas. "I'm not sure when I can return, but they need me. I must go." She ran to her room at the boarding house and gathered her small medical bag, the one Sani had made for her. Eli watched as she rode away, clutching Tahsénta's waist as they disappeared down the dusty road. At the ranch, Boone had watched over Sani as she tended Johanna, even bringing in another bed so she could stay close. Now Sani was weak and delirious. Laura hurried upstairs, assessing both patients quickly. Johanna lay pale and feverish, her breathing ragged. Sani, coughing deeply, tried to speak but could barely whisper, her lips tinged with blue. Johanna explained that Sani had fallen ill after caring for her, brewing lung leaf tea and rubbing oil on her chest until she was too sick to stand. Laura remembered a passage from her medical book about taking a pulse. She had tried it on herself, but never on someone else. She reached for Johanna's arm, noting that the beat was slower than her own. Both women burned with fever and struggled against a deep, wet cough. Laura recognized the signs. Lung fever, the same illness that had once taken her little brother. Later, she would learn the medical term, pneumonia. From the next room, Boone coughed harshly. The weight of responsibility pressed on Laura. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered a prayer for strength and guidance. She remembered her mother opening the window and sending her outside when her brother was sick. The medical book she studied each night spoke of washing hands and covering the mouth when patients were contagious. Sani had taught her about herbs and using plants, the two worlds of knowledge. One learned from a book, the other from the earth, now rested in her hands. I will pass this test, she whispered to herself, but there is much to do. She sent Boone outside to the porch for fresh air. Then going to the kitchen, she washed her hands and tied a kerchief around her face to cover her nose and mouth. Turning to Tahsénta, she said, "Go back to town. Find the saloon and ask for Ruby. Tell her I need her help and bring her back to the ranch." Laura found a pot and added the fuzzy herbs from her bag, then poured in water and set it to simmer. She gathered several flannel towels and carried the pot upstairs. Dipping one towel into the water, she wrung it out and laid it across Sani's chest, encouraging her to sip from the cup nearby. She took another towel, dipped it again, and asked Johanna to hold it to her mouth, breathing the warm vapors while Laura placed another on her chest. She pressed a cool compress to Sani's forehead, wiping away the beads of sweat. Sani held her ribs when she coughed but said nothing of the pain. Laura returned with a cup of tea made from willow bark to ease it. Tahsénta returned with Ruby, and Laura met them at the door. Skipping greetings, she said, "I need your help, but you have to know, you could get sick, even die. I'll do my best to protect you." Boone raised his brows, not realizing how serious things had become. Ruby, worried but steady, gave a small smile. "You are my only friend. Of course I'll help." "Open the windows," Laura instructed. "We all need sunlight and air." "Wash your hands first," she added. "We'll all need to drink peppermint tea. I left the leaves in the kitchen. Don't come upstairs. I'll come for mine. Take one to Boone. He's been coughing too." When Ruby returned with the tea, Boone surprised her with a folded kerchief. "I saw Laura wears one," he said. "You probably should too." Ruby smiled, feeling that rare, warm sense of being cared for. Laura came downstairs with a bundle of linens. "Wash these and hang them out to dry," she said. "Let the wind help us." She looked out the window and saw Tahsénta training a horse in the corral. Calm, patient, and gentle. For a moment she smiled, taking comfort in the steadiness of his movements. Then Johanna's cough pulled her back to the task at hand. "I'm not a doctor, Johanna," Laura said softly, "but I've seen lung fever before. I know your ribs hurt, but I need to help clear your lungs." Johanna nodded weakly. Laura made a fist, thumb turned outward, and began firm, rhythmic strikes across Johanna's back. Soon Johanna coughed hard, bringing up the congestion that had trapped her breath for days. That evening, Sani was no better. Laura stepped outside to find Tahsénta near the barn, the lamplight catching the strain on his face. "She's fading," Laura said quietly. "I've done everything I know." Tahsénta thought for a moment before speaking. "In my people's way," he said, "the sweat lodge can draw sickness out. The heat and steam open the lungs." Laura considered it. "Could we make something like that here?" He nodded once, then disappeared into the shadows. When he returned, he carried a soft hide draped over one shoulder. "This will do," he said. Inside, Laura arranged chairs around Sani's bed where she lay on her side. She draped the soft hide over the tall chair backs, forming a small tent. Then she prepared steaming herbs, mullein, peppermint, and a touch of pine, and asked Ruby to heat the water. The room filled with the scent of earth and mint. Laura slipped the pot beneath the tent and watched the steam curl through the air. When she looked up, Ruby was there with clean sheets. Laura shook her head at her for coming upstairs, but was grateful for the help. Together they changed Johanna's bedding, sponged her face, and tucked her back in. "Make broth for them both," Laura said, "and tell Boone Johanna's looking better." Laura knelt beside Sani's bed. "Tell me what to do," she whispered. "I need your help." Closing her eyes, she prayed again for guidance. When she opened them, Tahsénta stood quietly in the doorway, watching over them, grateful for Laura's courage. Together, Laura and Tahsénta lifted the hide away and replaced the sheets. Laura spooned broth between Sani's lips until a faint color returned to her face. Tahsénta stepped outside to speak with Ruby while Laura sponged Sani's skin with cool water. The fever broke before dawn. Ruby appeared again at the door. "Tahsénta had me prepare something for you to eat," she said softly, smiling. "I'll sit with them while you have a bite." Laura smiled wearily, gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Ruby. She glanced toward the window where the first light of morning was breaking. For the first time in days, she felt hope rising with the sun. Boone came up with a kerchief in place, his eyes twinkling as he saw Johanna awake, sitting up and breathing easier. He told her all that Laura had done. She may as well be a nurse, the way she took care of y'all. No one noticed the faint smile that crept onto Sani's lips. Boone turned to Ruby and reached for her hand. This girl's been doing laundry, making tea and broth, and keeping me company, he said. She's been a big help. And she came in knowing she might catch the fever. Ruby blushed, touched by his kindness. Boone's tone held that rare mix of pride and protectiveness, a man who saw more than a helper but a girl who needed a chance. She smiled shyly and said to Johanna, Your pa is quite the storyteller. Not sure what's true and what's not. Then quieter, she wondered what her own pa might have been like. Laura cared for the girls through the day, both seeming to grow stronger with each hour. That night she held Sani's hand while she slept and spoke softly about her dreams, medical school, helping the sick, and maybe one day meeting someone who shared her purpose. But if I can't, she whispered, I'll be all right. She drifted off beside Sani, her head resting on the edge of the bed. When the sun began to warm the room, Laura woke to find Sani smiling. Thank you, Sani whispered. I know you saved my life. Later that morning, Laura asked Boone if he could have someone bring the wagon around so she and Ruby could return to town. Boone looked over at Ruby, who didn't seem eager to leave. Well, Ruby, he said, Johanna and I have been talking. She could use some help around here, and somebody to talk to. We'd like to offer you a place to stay on, cooking for us and the cowboys. Ruby's eyes widened, then filled with tears. She turned to Laura. What do you think? Laura smiled, happy for her friend. I think it's a wonderful idea. Boone nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. In a few days, when Johanna feels better, we'll go to town, get your things, and stop by the store to pick up some dresses for you girls. They clasped hands and shared excitement. Ruby had found a family. At dusk, after Tahsénta brought Laura back to the boarding house, Caprock Crossing fell quiet. She watched as he headed home, his long black hair flying behind him. Before he rode away, he told her he would return before sunrise. There was something he wanted her to see. Sleep would not come. She lay awake listening to the creak of shutters and wondering where he would take her. She knew she would be safe. His sister was her best friend. At first light, Laura was dressed and waiting by the window. When she heard his horse outside, her heart lifted. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and went down to meet him. He looked tired from the night ride back, yet his smile was steady. Come, he said. There's something I want you to know before you leave for the city. They rode east until the land fell away, red cliffs opening to the wide heart of the canyon. Below them, small fires flickered near the caves where families moved quietly. You never said they were here, Laura said. The fewer who know, the safer they stay, he answered. Someday my people will need your medicine. Why not Sani? She walks her own path like you. Her dream is to teach. The wind lifted the sound of voices from below, and Laura knew she would never forget what she saw that morning. Children ran between the fires, their laughter mingling with the rhythm of pestles striking stone. Women bent over clay pots, the air rich with smoke and the scent of wild herbs. Elders sat close together, murmuring stories that rose and fell like prayer. For a long while, Laura said nothing. She simply watched, the small movements of a people rebuilding what the world had taken from them. In that silence, she understood what Tahsénta had meant. Healing wasn't only in medicine, it was in belonging, in memory, in the steady hands that kept the fire alive. 5 months later, the train whistle drifted over Caprock Crossing. Laura stepped down with her satchel, the first term of medical school behind her, in a restlessness she could not name. Her eyes searched for a familiar face. Near the edge of the platform, Tahsénta waited. When he saw her step down from the train, his face lit with relief, the kind that comes after too many uncertain days. Laura smiled, her pulse quickening at the sight of him. He looked the same, and yet, somehow, changed. Thinner, perhaps, and more guarded around the eyes. He took her satchel, his hand brushing hers. For a moment, the noise of the station fell away. But as they walked toward the horses, the warmth in his expression shifted. His eyes carried something she had not seen before, a quiet trouble that waited for the right moment to speak. "I had word from the north," he said quietly. "From the reservation. My wife and daughter were taken there after the soldiers cleared the valley. No one has seen them since. If I go, they will never let me leave alive. But I must do something." The words struck her still. The noise of the platform fell away, until all she could hear was the whistle fading in the distance. He had said wife. The world she imagined, the quiet hope she had not dared to name, slipped from her like smoke. Laura drew a slow breath, forcing her voice to steady. "There is news of sickness in the camps, possible epidemics. They will believe if someone comes who checks and makes reports. They would not question a doctor, or someone who looks like one." He shook his head. "You could lose everything you're working for." "I know you'd risk your life for them," she said. "Let me try a different way." By the next dawn she was gone, riding north with 2 steady bays from Boone's herd, one packed with food and blankets, the other for the family she hoped to bring home. At the reservation gate she showed a letter that named her as an inspector looking for signs of fever. The soldiers, worn thin and short of help, waved her through. A native interpreter followed her through the rows of tents. The air inside the camp was thick with smoke and coughs. She moved from one cot to the next, giving water, checking foreheads. In the far tent, a woman heavy with child pulled her aside. The woman's voice was low. She said the family Laura sought was gone now. Only the little girl remained. Laura found the child asleep under a worn blanket, small and feverish. She set a pot to boil and mixed herbs from her case. That night she told the guards she would remove one patient to prevent contagion. They were glad to see the sickness leaving their post. Before dawn she lifted the girl onto one of the spare horses and rode south. The second horse trailed empty behind, its saddle waiting for a mother who would never return. Tahsénta was waiting beyond the ridge. When Laura stopped, the girl blinked awake and smiled at the sight of him. He looked past her to the empty saddle. "Where is her mother?" Laura's voice was quiet. "She was gone before I arrived." He reached for the child and held her close while Laura turned her face toward the plains. By the end of that week, Boone Mercer had made room at the ranch for families. Smoke rose from the chimneys again, and for the first time in years, the valley carried laughter instead of fear. Among the cabins, Sani's voice could often be heard in the afternoons, steady and kind, teaching the young girls how to prepare salves and poultices from the roots they gathered. Laughter mixed with her patient instruction, and the scent of herbs drifted through the open doors. Through the months that followed, Laura came home between each school term. Each time the plains seemed a little greener, the cabins a little stronger. When her final year ended, she returned for good. When she told him she was home for good, Tahsénta caught her up and spun her once in his arms. A sharp, joyous cry broke from his throat, the kind his people gave in celebration. It was heard rolling across the fields until even the horses lifted their heads to listen. 2 months later, their ceremony for shared lives carried on through the night. Grateful families brought gifts for their home. Tahsénta found his smile again, and Laura, her dream of being both mother and doctor to the people. At Boone Mercer's ranch, where the red walls of Caprock Canyon caught the last of the day's light, the house stood quiet against the evening wind. Boone Mercer had not left his bed in 3 days. Johanna sat beside him, holding his hand, her weariness showing in her face. On the other side of the room, Laura stood watch, waiting for any small chance to offer comfort. Ruby lingered quietly in the doorway, unsure what her life would become when this moment passed. The windows were open to the cool evening breeze, letting the scent of cedar drift through the room. Tahsénta stood at one window, hand resting on the sill, watching the last light fade across the pastures. Boone's eyes opened and settled on him. "Son, come closer." Tahsénta moved to his bedside and leaned down so Boone wouldn't have to strain his voice. "You've worked hard here," Boone said. "Helped me build this place into what it is. I'd ask that you to keep it going, keep the families together, and most importantly, look after the girls. Johanna knows the books, and Ruby manages the sleeping quarters." Boone coughed, and Laura steadied a cup of water against his lips. Boone took another breath. "Tahsénta, no one deserves it more than you. I'm giving the ranch to you. With legal papers, no one can fight it." He gestured toward the envelope on the table, his will, already signed and witnessed by Johanna. Laura felt Tahsénta's tension. He excused himself to feed the animals needing the air. Boone looked at Laura and murmured, "With you by his side, I know everything will be fine." Later, Boone drifted into sleep as the sun went down, and not long after he fell still beneath the blue flannel blanket. His face looked peaceful. At dawn, they buried him on the hill above the house. The grass was thin there, the soil red as the canyon floor. Johanna stood beside Ruby, her fingers wrapped tightly around Ruby's arm. Tahsénta held his young daughter's hand. Laura stood close beside them. Sani scattered sage into the wind and placed herbs where Boone lay. "The earth takes back the body," she said softly. "What he tended now lives in our hearts." No one spoke after that. Only the wind moved through the blue-stem grasses. By the next afternoon, word had reached town. Men gathered on the porch of the general store, reading the headline Eli had printed himself. "Mercer Ranch deeded to Comanche." Some read it twice, hoping it might look different the second time. Others muttered into tin cups of coffee. Soon, the talk sharpened. "Ain't right," one said. "Next thing, they'll be running the town." Another spat into the dust. "We'll ride out and remind him where his place is. He belongs on a reservation anyway." Inside the store, Ruby was buying lamp oil and flour. She froze when she heard them. The men didn't lower their voices when she stepped through the door. Ruby secured her parcels, untied her horse, and swung into the saddle without a word. The sky above Caprock Crossing had turned the color of hammered copper. Eli spotted her from his office window and stepped outside. "Ruby, wait," he called. She reined in just long enough to look back. "I meant the article to be fair," he said. "Boone's words, nothing more." "You lit a match in a dry field, Eli," she said. "Don't act surprised at the fire." Then she kicked her horse and rode off, leaving him in a spray of dust. The storm broke just after dark. Wind tore across the plains, driving sheets of rain before it. Lightning struck somewhere near the west pasture, carrying the sharp smell of smoke. Tahsénta had the horses penned, and lamps lit along the porch when Ruby rode hard up the lane. She slid from the saddle, rain running down her hair and shoulders. "Men from town," she said, breathless. "They're coming tonight. Said you've taken what isn't yours." Tahsénta's face stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. Laura stepped up beside him, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "We'll be ready," he said. Sani appeared in the doorway, lamplight warm behind her. "No guns," she said. "Meet fear with proof." Tahsénta nodded. "Then we'll give them something to see." He sent the ranch hands to clear the yard and move the stock to the far fence. Laura gathered buckets by the pump. Ruby checked the lamps. When everything that might burn was moved away from the barn wall, they waited. The riders arrived just after midnight. 6 men, half drunk, half afraid, their lanterns swinging wild in the wind. They reined up in the yard, shouting Boone's name, demanding answers. Tahsénta stepped forward into the rain, the lamp behind him outlining his figure. "Boone Mercer gave this land with a clear mind," he said quietly. "If you mean to challenge that, you'll answer to me." Thunder drowned the next moment. Then a horse sidestepped. A lantern swung too wide. Glass shattered against the barn. Flames climbed the wall. "Water!" Tahsénta called. Laura ran for the pump, shouting to the men. Ruby grabbed a blanket and smothered sparks. Tahsénta and the hands threw bucket after bucket until steam rose in thick white bursts. Rain surged across the yard, hissing through the smoke, helping smother the fire. When the flames were gone, the riders sat in their saddles, soaked and ashamed. The sheriff arrived too late to stop the trouble, but not too late to speak. "Go home," he said. "You come back like this again and you won't ride away so light." One by one, they turned their horses and disappeared into the rain. Tahsénta leaned on the shovel he'd used to smother the fire. Laura returned with the last bucket and set it down beside him. They didn't speak. They stood together in the steaming yard until the thunder rolled away and only the rain remained. When the final steam lifted from the barn wall and the yard settled into heavy quiet, the riders were long gone, but their words still hung sharp in the air. Ruby stood at the porch rail, rain sliding down her face, her hands trembling with a rare, fierce anger. Laura touched her arm. "What is it?" Ruby stared toward the road that vanished into the plains. "Eli knew," she said softly. "He knew that headline would rattle men who don't need much rattling. He didn't lie. He just poured oil he knew would catch flame." 2 of Tahsénta's ranch hands, Taka and Stone Bear, were hauling away scorched timbers. They looked up at the sound of her voice. Ruby walked toward them, jaw set. "I need a favor," she said. "Not blood, not broken bones, just a lesson he won't forget." Taka nodded. "You want him frightened?" "Frightened," Ruby said. "Not harmed. He needs to understand what his words nearly cost us." The brothers exchanged a look. "Say no more," Stone Bear said. They mounted their rain-slick horses and rode into the dark. Ruby stayed on the porch, gripping the rail until her knuckles whitened. It was well past midnight when Eli stepped out of his office, turning the key in the lock. The rain had eased to a drizzle. He pulled his coat tight and glanced along the dim street. A horse snorted in the shadows. Before he could turn, a hand caught his collar, firm but not cruel. "Evening," Stone Bear said behind him. "We're going for a ride." Eli froze. "What? Why? What's this about?" "I think you know, newsman," Taka said from the darkness. "You printed something you knew would stir trouble for our people." Eli tried to step back, but Stone Bear kept a steady grip as they guided him toward the horses. Taka leaned in. "Words can kill as quick as fire. Don't set them burning unless you're ready to see the cost." Eli swallowed and nodded too fast. They rode for a long stretch, coyotes howling across the plains. Eli had never felt fear gather so deep in his bones. "Dismount," Taka said, quietly. Eli obeyed. They circled him once, letting the dark press in around him. Then Taka said, Close your eyes. Turn 3 times. Eli did as he was told. When he opened his eyes, they were gone. His horse stood waiting. Something hung from the horn, Ruby's necklace. Eli felt sick, not from fear, but from understanding. Ruby watched from the porch as Taka and Stone Bear emerged from the dark. "Done?" she asked. Stone Bear nodded. "He won't sleep much tonight." Ruby exhaled, the tightness in her chest easing at last. "Good," she whispered. Morning brought gray skies and uneasy quiet. Smoke curled from the cabins. The barn wall was blackened, but still standing. Tahsénta walked the fence line while Laura checked the garden. Across the yard, Sani swept mud from the porch steps, watching him with steady eyes. She knew the anger wouldn't vanish. Men carried grudges the way wind carried dust, always finding a place to settle. That evening she joined them near the porch rail. "They'll be back," she said. "Maybe not tonight, but soon. Hate doesn't die easy." Tahsénta looked up from the tack he was mending. "Then we'll wait." "No," Sani said gently. "Waiting feeds it. We'll do something they don't expect." Laura tilted her head. "What are you thinking?" "We open our gates," Sani said. 3 days later, wagons began rolling up the Mercer Road. Word had traveled quietly through the children, the women who shared bread, anyone tired of long bitterness. They arrived with cautious eyes and hands unsure where to rest. Sani had set long tables across the yard, filled with food from the ranch kitchen and dishes her own people brought from their fires. Beans and venison, fry bread and cornbread, pots of coffee, sweet cakes from Johanna's oven. Laura sat at a small table teaching mothers how to identify herbs and steep them properly. Sani ground willow bark and mint, showing simple medicines with a calm, steady voice. Tahsénta and the ranch hands shoed horses for free, letting men from town watch their precision and skill. By late afternoon, the line between us and them had begun to blur. Children chased one another through the grass. A fiddle played. Someone brought a drum. When dusk settled, lamps glowed across the tables. Sani stepped onto the porch where Boone used to stand and watch his cattle graze. The crowd quieted. "Boone Mercer said this land was for anyone who worked it honest," she said. "That's all we ask, that the work be shared, and the healing too." Heads nodded. A man near the back raised his hat in silent respect. It was enough. By the time the stars came out, the last wagon creaked down the hill. The yard was scattered with empty plates and trampled grass, but the air felt lighter. Ruby and Johanna gathered dishes by lantern light. Laura tucked Tahsénta's daughter beneath a quilt. Tahsénta carried chairs back under the porch. Sani walked the yard, extinguishing lamps one by one. When she reached the last one, she paused, looking out over the dark pasture. Crickets sang, cattle lowed in the distance. Peace, fragile but real, had finally settled. A week later, talk in town had changed. Some still grumbled, but others spoke of the food, the music, the children laughing together. The anger wasn't gone, but it no longer owned the conversation. Each autumn after that, the Mercer yard filled again, until folks simply called it Mercer Day. Years later, one evening when the valley glowed the color of honey and fire, Sani sat at a table showing children how to grind herbs into powder. Laura crossed the yard with a basket of fresh bandages. Ruby and Johanna hung white curtains in the cabin windows, catching the last gold of sunset. Tahsénta turned the horses loose in the pasture with his son, a boy with his father's dark eyes and steady hands, while his daughter played close by the porch. The ranch hummed with work and laughter and the faint music of a fiddle drifting from the steps. As the sun slipped behind the plains, the lamps of Caprock Crossing burned steady and warm. What had once threatened to tear the valley apart was long behind them. What remained were the hands that chose to build instead of burn, and when the final light faded from the sky, the Mercer house stood glowing against the dark, offering comfort to every soul who called it home.